obviously rotating on my own thing. This is obviously rotating on my own. Good to see two of you here already. I will be right back because I cannot see your comments page, which is annoying. I like to interact with the comments. It came up when I did it as a practice. So I'm going to go and get my mobile phone in case I can follow them on there. Wow, I had two viewers and now I have one. And one of which I think counts as me. I don't think there's anyone there. I'm going to give it another couple of minutes for anyone to join on, just in case there is someone there. Okay, I'm going to press the start recording button, whether or not there are plenty of people here, because I will do this anyway, and then it'll be available to watch another time. So if you are there, it is fantastic to see you. Let's get started. Hi everybody, and welcome to the Pock and Rop live stream for having hit 250 subscribers. I put a few messages out over the last week or so asking which decade I should do the tier listing of the number ones. The vote was close, but it went for the 1970s, which does mean that at the point at which I hit 500 subscribers, it will be the 1990s that I do. So if you want to see me tier list the 1990s singles, then you better kind of share whatever videos are out there. I'm going to dive straight in and crack on with it. I'll just explain my tier list ranking system. I have 7 categories, kicking off at the top with Outstanding, which is a song that I think is, or indeed a performance of the song that I think is absolutely phenomenal and possibly even iconic. We've then got the standard A, B, C, D, E. C would be, actually, I'd probably say above average. D is all right. E is pretty awful song, but I wouldn't necessarily turn the radio off for it. And Travesty is exactly what it says in there. It should never have got to number 1 in my opinion. Either because it's an awful song or an awful performance or just an embarrassment to music generally. Anything that ends up in A and B is pretty decent stuff. There are, by my reckoning, I think it's something like 270, might even be 290 UK number ones from the 1970s. Some songs were number 1 for flipping ages. So it's definitely going to be a quicker video than it would have been had we ended up with the 1990s. We're kicking off then with the first number 1, the first new number 1 of the 1970s. To say the first number 1 of the 70s was, of course, Rolf Harris with Two Little Boys. However, that got some born in the 60s, so it's not counted here. And I'd just like to say that Rolf Harris is not going to be the worst sex offender that we have to deal with in the course of this video. But let's kick off then with the first single to get to number 1 in the 70s, and that was Edison Lighthouse with Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes. I think this is a rather nice song, actually. I think it's really enjoyable. It's not wonderful, but it's certainly slightly above average, so I'm going to stick it in B. And then we're going to be listening to Wandering Star by Lee Marvin. I was born under a wandering star. If you can tell by the tone of my voice, it's not going to be ranked highly by me. This spent 3 weeks at number 1, and I can't for the life of me think why. It's a terrible song. Next one from 1970 was Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. I genuinely consider Bridge Over Troubled Water to be one of my top 10 songs of all time. It's absolutely beautiful song, and it's one of those songs that I've heard some comments made on a podcast I listened to that actually Simon and Garfunkel's version is a little bit overwrought. I disagree. I think it's the definitive version. I think it's one of those songs that, in my opinion, no cover can ever better. And that's not the same for all Simon and Garfunkel songs. Sounds of Silence is a song I like a lot, but until you hear the Disturbed cover version, I don't think you've heard the best of A Sound of Silence. Next up is Dana, the Irish Eurovision winner with All Kinds of Everything. I like a lot of Eurovision. I'm a big Eurovision pop fan, but for me, this is just I'm going to put it up in D. I've originally got on my notes here that I've put it in E tier, and I think that's a little bit mean. It's just a little bit drippy, but it's not wonderful. I may move it later. Next up, I actually thought this song came out in the 60s. It has a very 60s feel. It's Norman Greenbaum with Spirit in the Sky. And if you've watched my videos before, you'll have heard me mention how much I detest Spirit in the Sky. I hate every single version of this song, whether it be Norman Greenbaum's or Wizard, not Wizard, Doctor and the Medics. There is a link to Wizard. And Gareth Gates and the Kumars at number 42. They are just... Oh, the song's awful, irrespective of who's singing it. Next up is the England World Cup squad with Back Home. So at the time, England were the World Cup holders. There was a lot of expectation that they would retain it, and they released a single. I don't know if this is the first successful football single. I think it's the first one that ever got to number one. And Back Home's actually not a bad song. However, it is, considering England were kicked out in the quarterfinals, it's an E. It's one of the better football songs out there. Next, we have Christie with Yellow River, which you might not even remember. It's E. I mean, so far, 1970 is not shaping up to be a terrific decade for singles. A terrific year, rather, 1970. There's nothing so far, apart from Bridge Over Troubled Water, that I even remotely consider to be brilliant. And I've got to say that the next track, which was 7 weeks at number one in the summertime, much admired. However, let's be honest, the line, have a drink, have a drive, is a bit close to knuckle. It's only a D tier for me. It's just below what I'd consider okay average. It's, like I said, I'd never turn the radio off. Next up, Elvis Presley with The Wonder of You, which was 6 weeks at number one. Like I said, there's a lot of singles during this decade that spent many weeks at the top. And The Wonder of You is not Elvis's best song. Even in that period, it's not the best song. I mean, things like Suspicious Minds or In the Ghetto, which both I think stalled at the number 2 spot, are way better than The Wonder of You. It's another D. And carrying on through the year, we get Smokey Robinson and the Miracles with Tears of a Clown. And we have our first A-tier song. Not outstanding, but damn fine. It is a great song by a great artist, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. And it can only sit in the A tier for me. Next up is Free to Pain with Band of Gold. This is the second A tier song in a row because that's absolutely great song. I love Band of Gold. I think the lyrics are superb. I actually wrote a song myself some years ago about breaking up, and it wasn't written from personal experience. But I used lots of song titles or album titles about people splitting up their record collection. And one of the lines which I'm most proud of is, "You left behind your band of gold." And I was referencing Free to Pain. Great song. Next up, Matthew Southern Comfort. Now, when I did my 80s tier list, I said that there were 3 songs I had to go back and listen to because I didn't remember them or wasn't sure what they were. I think it was Sonia and New Edition and Steve Silk Hurley. There's a fair few more from the 1970s that I've had to go back and listen to, and Matthew Southern Comfort, Woodstock, was one of them. So Woodstock was written by Joni Mitchell, the much admired Joni Mitchell. I actually don't particularly like Joni Mitchell very much. I don't particularly like her voice, which I know is probably sacrilege to say that. And Woodstock, it's not a travesty, but it's not good. Penultimate number one from 1970 was Voodoo Child, Slight Return by Jimi Hendrix Experience from the Electric Ladyland album, originally recorded and released in 1968. Jimi Hendrix died, and Voodoo Child shot to number one after his death for 1 week. And it's an A-tier song for me. It's Jimi Hendrix, and whilst I don't think everything Jimi Hendrix did was absolutely phenomenal, Voodoo Child is a great song. And to conclude 1970, It's Dave Edmunds with I Hear You Knocking, which I know is a cover song, but I think it's a B tier. It sits alongside the opening song of the year, Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes, as a song that I like whenever I hear it and it comes on. I just noticed, having looked through it, I've got absolutely nothing in the bang average tier from 1970. Um, so, I can't see any specific comments about the streaming, so I shall plough on into 1971. I've got a feeling we might go an awful lot quicker than we did with the 1980s. So, into 1971, and the first single that got to number one in 1971 was Clive Dunn's Grandad. So, Clive Dunn he was an actor. He played the role of Corporal Jones in Dad's Army, and he specialised in playing characters significantly older than he was. The song was written by a couple of guys, one of whom was Herbie Flowers, who's a bassist. It's terrible. I have heard a story from our family history where my sister gave our granddad this as a single, and my mum says it's the only time that she remembers my granddad being overcome with emotion. Other than, of course, when with bereavements and things. I mean, I wasn't born at the time. I was born in '74, so this predates me. So there's a lovely little family story with it, but my word, is the song terrible. The next track up is My Sweet Lord by George Harrison. So again, if you've watched previous videos of mine, you'll have known that I do not love My Sweet Lord. I don't think it's the best thing on All Things Must Pass. But it is a B tier song. It is a song I enjoy enough so that it makes very little difference. Next up, Mungo Jerry, Baby Jump. 2 weeks at number one. If you haven't heard this, then I would like to say that I envy you. I've listened to this a couple of times. The main time was when I was trying to work out what it was that kept Another Day by Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney off the number one spot, and it was this. Now, I'm a McCartney fan, therefore it should be no surprise where I've just put it straight into travesty, but the song itself is awful. It wasn't the only song to keep it off number one, because so did Hot Love by T-Rex. And you know what? Hot Love is... it's solidly D tier. I mean, I could potentially on Another Day if I'm in the mood. I'm not a massive T-Rex or Mark Bolan fan. I could put it in C tier as a bang average. But Hot Love's good. It was T-Rex's first number one. It's by no means their best. They've got more to come. Next, we have Dawn, or Tony Orlando and Dawn, with Knock Three Times. They're going to get to number one twice during this decade, and it's possibly an indicator of how the charts had significantly changed from the 60s. Knock Three Times it's not good, but it's not terrible. I can understand why it caught the imagination of the record buying public. So Knock Three Times at the E tier. I've just realised my little list was slightly out of order, because the next one should have been this, which is Double Barrel by Dave and Ansel Collins. This is another one that I had to go back and listen to make sure I knew what it was. And I really liked Double Barrel. It's mostly instrumental, and it's kind of like a reggae instrumental track, and it's one of those ones that when you hear it, you think, oh gosh, I've known that. I've heard that used in things like Death in Paradise. It's really, really fun. So I'll pop that in the B tier. Next up, we've got Chirpy Chirpy Cheep Cheep by Middle of the Road. Fun fact, this song globally has sold over 10 million copies. And whilst I'm not going to say it's a travesty, it isn't a travesty. I can't understand why a song as slight as this has found its way to selling 10 million copies. However, there was a very dark underbelly when you listen to this song. Where's your mama gone? Where's your papa gone? Where's your baby gone? They're far, far away. And there's an abandonment issue in it for like a light bubblegum pop song. However, I don't particularly like it, so it's an E. Next, we're back with T-Rex again for Get It On. Mark Bolan was not a good lyricist. Get It On, bang a gong. But it is a blistering track, actually. Get It On. And so I have placed it in the B tier. The next up is Diana Ross, I'm Still Waiting. So on a previous video, I talked about Chain Reaction and how Chain Reaction, she didn't know was a massive hit in the UK. So that when she was touring in the UK and she played and she got this huge reception because people had told her, you've got to do it, she was rather shocked. It turns out the same thing happened with I'm Still Waiting. This was not a hit, as far as I'm aware, in America. It wasn't one of her biggest and best known. But in the UK, it was a smash #1 for 4 weeks. And I'm Still Waiting, really like it. B tier. Next up, we have got the Tams with Hey Girl, Don't Bother Me. I had to listen to this one. And I was really pleasantly surprised. I kind of thought I knew it, but I needed to make sure. It's a 60s song, I believe, that then became a success in 71. But yeah, popped it into the C tier. It's our first entry in the bang average section. Next up, we're coming towards the end of 1971 with Rod Stewart and Maggie May, and coupled with Reason to Believe. It is strictly speaking, I think, classed as a double A side. It was originally Reason to Believe was released, which is a good song, but the DJs flipped the record and started playing Maggie May off the Every Picture Tells a Story album. It made him a star. I mean, he was having success with the Faces, but it made him a solo star. And Maggie May is absolutely outstanding. Reason to Believe, I'd probably put in A, but Maggie May, the real successful hit, is our second outstanding song from the 1970s. I absolutely love Maggie May. Next up is Slade's first #1 single, 'Cause I Love You. I am a huge fan of Slade. If you watch my 80s tier list, you'll know I had a go at the Flying Pickets because they kept Slade off #1 with My Oh My. I mean, Slade's had 6 #1s. We're going to cover all of them in this video. This was the first. 'Cause I Love You. It's my third outstanding song of the 1970s. Absolutely adore 'Cause I Love You. And that brings us to the end of 1971, and it's a comedy record at #1. There will be a fair few comedy records getting to the top of the charts in this decade, and it's Benny Hill, Ernie, the fastest milkman in the West. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that I'm going to be putting this into travesty. However, you would be completely wrong, because I think Ernie, the fastest milkman in the West, is absolutely fantastic. And if you'll forgive me, I will impersonate. You could hear the hoof-beats pound as they raced across the ground. I absolutely think it's fantastic. Ernie, the fastest milkman in the West, is one of the best comedy records of all time, and I've popped it into beta. It's not good enough to get A or outstanding, but it is certainly a joy. So we'll pause there. It's nice to see that there's 2 of you watching, because it means I'm not completely alone talking to myself doing this. If you want to leave a chat, I can see them because I've got a sight of them on my phone. Be great if you want to interact with me and disagree with me. Tell me what you think about some of these songs. It's not been a great 1970s so far. But we'll move on to 1972. I'll just take a swig. If you're wondering, it's Aldi's Blood Orange Cider. Also, in the chat, if you want to tell me who you are and where it is you are in the world while I'm doing this this live stream, that'd be great as well. So into 1972, and the first number one of 1972 was The New Seekers. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. If you don't know the story, this was originally I'd like to buy the world a Coke, and it got turned into a slightly different song because they turned an advertising campaign into a single. The song is slight, but it's not absolutely detestable. It's only an E tier. I couldn't put it higher than that. But it is. It was an advert, for heaven's sake, and that's not the thing about it. Berlin. I had to rank Berlin's "Take My Breath Away." Not "Take My Breath Away." Robin Beck, the first time, which was also a Coke advert, or a Pepsi advert. I can't remember. Yeah. Next up, Telegram Sam from T-Rex. I said there was better stuff to come from T-Rex. We've already had Get It On, which I think I popped in, by the looks of it, I popped it into the B tier. Telegram Sam is a C tier song for me. 2 weeks at number one in February 72. And taking over from that for 3 weeks was Son of My Father by Chicory Tip. I do not know another song by Chicory Tip. One hit. Definitely feels like a one-hit wonder to me, but it was a good one-hit wonder, and I'm popping it in the B tier. And now we get to Nilsson's Without You. Now, if you happen to check out or see something come up in, I put a little poll out, a quiz question. Which song am I least likely to put in the travesty tier? And I put in, because obviously I didn't know if it was going to do 70s or 90s, depending on how the vote went. I put in Nilsson's Without You and Mariah Carey's Without You, and Terry Jack's Season in the Sun, and Westlife's Seasons in the Sun. Now, if you watched any of my videos, you'll know full well Westlife was never going to end up in anything other than travesty. But the one vote that I saw, or the one quiz answer that I saw, suggested that somebody thought that I would least likely put Terry Jacks in travesty. Well, you have to wait to see where I've put it. But honestly, did you really need to ask? Without You by Nilsson is, number one, a phenomenal song, and a tragic song written by Pete Ham and Evans and Ham from Badfinger, off their No Matter What album. And Nilsson heard it, Nilsson picked it up and delivered one of the greatest cover versions of all time. Without You by Nilsson is absolutely terrific. Carey's version of it, whether or not it's a travesty. But moving on from Nilsson, absolutely wonderful song. 5 weeks at number one, but was not the most successful and best-selling single of that year. Rather surprisingly, this was the next one, which was the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards with Amazing Grace. I love the song Amazing Grace, but I have to be in the right mood for a pipe band. And I am rarely, if ever, in the right mood for a pipe band. I do wonder what great songs Amazing Grace might have held off the number one spot. 1972, I can tell you one thing for certain, it wasn't going to be Wings. Next one up is T-Rex with Metal Guru, or as it's sung in the song, Metal Guru. Is it true? This is possibly, with the exception of 20th Century Boy, my favourite T-Rex song. Metal Guru is A tier. It's not quite outstanding because I can rarely ever get beyond Mark Bolan's lyrics, but it's an absolutely banging song. And given the fact that I'm a Smiths fan and I love the song Panic, I have to like Metal Guru because they nicked it. Next up, Don McLean, Vincent, from the American Pie album. American Pie itself only got to number 2, but Vincent shot to number 1 for a couple of weeks, and I think this is one of the most beautiful ballads of the 1970s, certainly the early 70s. Beautiful songwriting. It's really lovely subject matter, all about Vincent van Gogh and his troubled life and death, and then eventually people were lauding his portraits in and pictures in the galleries. It's a lovely song, Vincent. Next up is Slade with "Take Me Back Home." Slade were famous in the early 70s for misspelling their single titles. "Take Me Back Home" is no different. I don't think it's the best of Slade's number 1 singles, but I do still enjoy it, and I'm popping it into the B tier. Next up, Donny Osmond with "Puppy Love." I really, and I've probably got no credit. You do know, like I like rock and pop, and this is a great pop single. I really enjoy hearing "Puppy Love." I place that in the B tier. Next up, Alice Cooper with "School's Out." A definitive early 70s hard rock song, and one of my big surprises in the last 15, 18 months or so was listening to Alice Cooper's most recent album, Road, and thinking, wow, this was good. School's Out, it's an A-tier song. It's not quite outstanding, but it isn't far off. Next up, Rod Stewart again with his second UK number 1 with "You Wear It Well." "You Wear It Well" is one of Rod's best songs. It's another outstanding, and it feels weird to suggest that I might be a Rod Stewart fan. I'm not, but I like a lot of Rod Stewart's output in the 70s, and this was in his kind of like his credible phase before he then became a little bit of the lounge lizard that we kind of know him for. So Rod Stewart, "You Wear It Well" into the outstanding tier. And that's followed up by Slade's "Mama, We're All Crazy Now." Again, thoroughly and utterly misspelt. I like Slade. You're getting the hang of this. I'm popping that into the B tier. At some point, I am going to do some Slade-focused videos. I think they're one of the most underrated bands in UK music history. This band had 6 UK number 1 hit singles, several successful albums, and they seem to be inextricably linked with Christmas. They're more than Christmas. Next up, a song I had to listen to check it out, because I'd never really listened to anything by David Cassidy. It's "How Can I Be Sure." I enjoyed it enough. It's bang average for me. Next up, Lieutenant Pigeon. Or I suppose they're British, so it's probably Lieutenant Pigeon, isn't it? With "Mouldy Old Dough." What a piece of mouldy old dough. It's awful. I wish I wasn't saying it was awful, but it absolutely is. I understand it was like a granny banging away on a piano, and they recorded it and shouting "mouldy old dough." Oh, man, what on earth were people thinking in October 72? Not only to get this number 1, but to hold it there for 4 weeks. Man. Next up, Gilbert O'Sullivan with "Claire." Claire's actually a pretty decent song. I've originally put this into the D tier, but looking how Spartan things are looking on the C tier, I think they need some friends. I've probably put it in D originally because the way that I know Claire is because of the Barron Knights doing a parody version of it, where they sang, "Claire, what have you done over there? You know that your father's best chair. It couldn't have been me. I went before tea." And it makes you wonder what on earth they're singing about. But Claire's actually not a bad song. Next up, Chuck Berry, rock and roll legend, writer of some of the greatest ever rock and roll songs. We've got stuff like Johnny Be Good, and You Can't Catch Me, and his version of Route 66. And then he got a UK number one hit single, My Dingaling, which may or may not be about a certain part of his anatomy. Um, it's terrible. How can a rock legend that be his sole UK number one? It's better off not having one than having that. And to conclude the year, we have got little Jimmy Osmond with Long Haired Lover from Liverpool for 5 weeks. That's another travesty. I don't know what it stopped getting to number one, but there's a very good chance that between Mouldy Old Dough, My Dingaling, and Longhead Lover from Liverpool, Slade were again kept off number one with possibly their best song. That was from the era, which was Goodbye to Jane. This isn't why I put them in travesty. They're just awful. But I think I'd have a special level of hell if they happened to be a travesty that also stopped Goodbye to Jane. I love Goodbye to Jane. So that's the end of 1972. I don't think we've got any comments, which is a shame. I like interacting with your comments, but maybe I should do my next live stream at a different day of the week. I chose this because my wife's out for the evening, so I wouldn't be disturbing her. Into 1973, we're getting closer to my existence on the planet, and the year kicks off with Blockbuster by The Sweet. Blockbuster's terrific. It's straight into the outstanding. I absolutely adore listening to Blockbuster. And then it was replaced at number one by another outstanding song, which is Come On, Feel the Noise. So far, with the exception of Bridge Over Troubled Water, probably my favourite song that's been put into the outstanding tier. This was, for me, probably Slade's real signature song, to the point where I think it was Cheap Trick covered it in the US and managed to turn it into a hit because Slade just couldn't crack America. And after that was a hit in America, they then started to have a couple of hits with My Oh My and Run Run Away. And unfortunately, they couldn't capitalise on it due to ill health. But Come On, Feel the Noise, outstanding. Next up is Donny Osmond again with The 12th of Never. I had to listen to this. I don't like it, but I don't absolutely despise it. I do try and keep the travesty section for real things I either despise or are affronts to music. Next up, Gilbert O'Sullivan with Get Down. I had to listen to this. It's not as good as Claire, so I'm quite glad I put Claire into the C tier and left this one into the D tier. We then have Tony Orlando and Dawn again, and Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree. 4 weeks at number one, the best-selling single of 1973, and it's terrible. Absolutely awful song. Maudlin. It's in that tradition of prison themed songs, a bit like Green Green Grass of Home is believed to be somebody facing the gallows, and they're dreaming and think that they're going to be back home. And this one is about someone being released from prison to see whether or not the person still loves them. As someone who works with the Ministry of Justice, that's a very idealised view of the release of somebody from prison, which almost certainly never happens. Next up, Wizard, See My Baby Jive. So Wizard is the brainchild of Roy Wood, who was in The Move. The Move kind of dissolved and then kind of became the Electric Light Orchestra. And then he kind of fell out with Jeff Lynne, and then formed another band, which was Wizard. And See My Baby Jive is an absolutely really good song. I'm popping it into the B tier, which means that the B tier is the first one to end up having to double up a little bit. Next up is Susie Quattro with Can the Can. I find Can the Can a really fun song to listen to. I like Susie Quattro. It won't be her last appearance on this list, and I think it sits right alongside Wizard. Next is 10cc. This was not their debut single, that was Donna, which if you ever listen to it, Donna is most definitely an acquired taste because of the high falsettos and then the suddenly low vocals. Really weird song. But 10cc hit number one with Rubber Bullets, and Rubber Bullets, I think, is outstanding. Absolutely great single. It's got their trademark quirkiness and weirdness in it, but it's an absolutely great song. Next up, we're back with Slade for their 5th UK number one, and it's Squeeze Me, Please Me. There is a story that that they may not have actually intended this song ever actually to get the exposure it did, that they kind of recorded it, they refer to themselves in it. You've got this great line about so take me back home, you got it all wrong, because we sing that as well. They've just been having a go at people said like why can't you learn to spell? And this was number one as kind of like a bit of a respite. There'd been a serious car accident involving the drummer Don Powell, in which his girlfriend was killed, and Squeeze Me Please Me was a bit of a stopgap kind of thing, because they'd already, or just after that accident, is when they recorded their most famous song, which of course is coming up. And apparently Don Powell had to be lifted onto the drum seat to record it, and he still, to this day, I believe, suffers with issues of his memory. Anyway, little story aside, Squeeze Me Please Me, it is a tier. It's really fun. It's because of the fun lyrics, because it's not Slade's best song by any stretch, but it is just fun. I don't know that they ever really played that one live very much. They're a phenomenal live band. Next up, Peters and Lee with Welcome Home. I didn't realise it. In terms of preparing this, I knew the song, obviously, but I didn't know that the Peters of Peters and Lee was blind. I mean, it makes no difference to whether or not the song's any good or not. I mean, I'm popping it in D tier, but I'd probably say it's high D. Possibly on a good day, I might even nudge it into C. It is cheesy listening, but it's perfectly fine cheesy listening, really. Next up, it's Gary Glitter. Now, I did say this was not going to be the worst sex offender mentioned, rather Rolf Harris wasn't going to be, because that is Gary Glitter. With I'm the leader of the gang I am. Now, can you divorce an artist from their artistry because of what they've done? Some claim you should. Others say you shouldn't. I don't think you can. So, Gary Glitter, and you will find this with his next two number one singles are going to go straight into travesty. I couldn't with all consciousness say, oh, I really like I'm the leader of the gang I am. It has to go into the travesty because of who it is. Next up, Donny Osmond with Young Love. We go from someone who was a sleazebag sex offender to possibly the cleanest cut image of pop music with Donny Osmond. Young Love, I put it into the C tier. I had to listen to it to make sure, and it was perfectly fine. Next, we have Wizard again. So, having left ELO, and because of disagreements with Jeff Lynne, the formation of Wizard led to 2 number one hit singles. And Angel Fingers is nowhere near as good as See My Baby Jive. I popped it in D. Next up, Eye Level by the Simon Park Orchestra, which was the theme song to the detective show Van der Valk. It's an instrumental. I really like it actually. I've always enjoyed the tune of Eye Level. So I'm going to pop that into B. Next we have David Cassidy again with Daydreamer. Now, I listened to Daydreamer to make sure it was fine. Probably D, maybe even E tier, depending on my mood. But the Puppy song was the second song listed. It was a double A side. The Puppy song was written by Harry Nilsson, who is already sitting in the outstanding tier. If you've never heard the Puppy song, it's used in the film You've Got Mail, featuring Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks, and it's just a joyful little song, and I'm going to pop it into the C tier. There really isn't a lot going into C tier as bang average at the moment, is there? I can actually now see some comments, which I'll deal with when I get to the end of the year, which is only 2 songs away, because Gary Glitter, straight into Travesty, I Love You Love, Me Love, he's going straight in there. And then finally, Merry Christmas Everybody by Slade. So, this is one of the most overplayed songs in history, but it is also one of the finest ever Christmas songs. And actually, as a single in and of its own right, it's just great. Merry Christmas Everybody is an outstanding song. It makes, allegedly, Noddy Holder $500,000 a year, just through plays and downloads and listens. He refers to it as his pension plan. And I put it in outstanding tier. I could have put it in the A tier just for the fact that it's so overshadowed their singles career that's kind of unfair. But it is so good and so well written. And yes, like so many Christmas songs, recorded on the hottest day of the year in the middle of the summer, not long after that car accident that I mentioned earlier. So that concludes 1973. We're getting to the year I was born. But we've got a couple of comments. Matthew says, I agree that Slade are often seen as a bit of a novelty act because of the Christmas song, but made some great songs. And I've known Matt for quite a while. I know full well he's a big Oasis fan, and he loves Oasis's version of Come On, Feel the Noise. Have Oasis been trying to channel Slade all these years? And I challenge any other YouTubers to move from Gary Glitter to Donny Osmond in one segue. I put that challenge out there as well. Can you do it as smooth as I've done to go from that to Donny Osmond? Challenge is laid down. Into 1974, the best year in history because it's when I came to be. So kicking off with 1974, will it be a good year for music other than the fact that I was born in it? The New Seekers, You Won't Find Another Fool Like Me. So previously, we have had the New Seekers with I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing. This was their second number one, and it's actually slightly better. I had to listen to it to make sure on my Spotify, and I thought actually it's not good enough to be average, but it's just below it. Next up, the biggest selling single of 1974 was Tiger Feet by Mud. We're kind of starting to see the end of glam and a resurgence of rock and roll, or rock and roll style. And Tiger Feet by Mud is kind of straddling that gap. Tiger Feet's fun when you hear it, and I'm going to pop it in B. Next up, Suzi Quatro with Devilgate Drive. I've actually got this on my list in the B tier, but I actually think I've probably underrated it slightly. It's definitely at least a high B, and I'm going to pop it into A tier because I kind of feel like it's better than Can the Can. Yeah, Devilgate Drive, I've kind of promoted it to an A tier whilst we were talking. Next up, Alvin Stardust, his sole UK number one with Jealous Mind, and by no means his best song. I would happily listen to Pretend, which came out in 1981, And I would also very happily listen to My Kookachoo. That's fun. But Jealous Mind is just a little bit boring and forgettable. I put it into D. Next is Paper Lace with Billy Don't Be a Hero. My mum had this single. Now, Paper Lace, I think, became famous as a result of appearing on Opportunity Knocks. If it wasn't Opportunity Knocks, it was New Faces. One of the talent shows that was on in the 70s. I remember loving this song as a kid. Um, as I've gotten older and gotten more interested in music, I don't love it anymore. But I will have a nice little nostalgic rush whenever I hear it on, say, Ken Bruce's show, whilst I'm waiting for Popmaster. Yes, I won Popmaster. Um, for me, I'm going to pop it into the D tier. And now we come to Terry Jacks, Seasons in the Sun. This is the one that, certainly when I checked it before we came on, one person had answered the question and had chosen this as the song I was least likely to put into travesty. Are you having a laugh? It is a maudlin, depressing pile of turd. I loathe the song. I only recently discovered that originally this was a Jacques Brel song. Now, I quite like Jacques Brel songs, particularly when they're done by Scott Walker. But then there was an English translation done. And then I've also read that at least a quarter of the lyrics, possibly more, were then rewritten by Terry Jacks for his version. Apparently, during the Surf's Up sessions for the Beach Boys, they had a go at doing Seasons in the Sun, and they couldn't grasp it. I'm really glad they haven't got a proper version. Apparently, you can hear their version of it because it's such a garbage song. Goodbye, my friend, it's hard to die when all the sunbirds are singing in the sky. And it's just, My sister had this on a cassette somebody had made for, which was called Songs for Depression, which was kind of dark, really. But on there as well was something like Labelled with Love by Squeeze. Labelled with Love is not a song for depression. It is 10,000 times better than Terry Jacks. Seasons in the Sun. It's just... I honestly, I can't remember if when I did my worst number ones of the 70s, if I put it on there or not. I think I did. Yeah, I might have to revisit my worst number ones of the 70s because I've realised that there's a couple of songs on there that I was overly harsh upon. You'll find out as we go through. Next up, from travesty to pop perfection with Waterloo by ABBA. Obviously the Eurovision winner, and even today it's just perfect. I defy anybody to say that Waterloo is a bad song. Next we have the Rubettes with Sugar Baby Love. I had to listen to it and I didn't think much of it. I'm popping that into the E tier. Next up we have a comedy song. This is our second comedy song of the 1970s. It is The Streak by Ray Stevens. All about the in vogue trend at the time for people whipping their clothes off and streaking at things like sporting events. It's quite a funny comedy song, but it isn't good by any sense of the word. I'm popping that in the D tier. Only managed 1 week because it was replaced at number one by Gary Glitter again with Always Yours. You know where it's going. I've already telegraphed all of that. Cannot divorce the artist and the art. And then finally, we get to the point at which I was born. This next song was the number one on the day I was born. It is She by Charles Aznavour. A torch song translated from the original French into English and sung by the same artist. By all accounts, this is the kind of song I would be slapping down in the E or travesty section, but I love She. I think She is an absolutely terrific song. And it's just... It's so enjoyable. I love Elvis Costello's version from 1999, which was in the film Notting Hill. Notting Hill is the film I tend to watch when I feel sick and I feel ill. Um, much as I'm a Costello fan, I think the Charles Aznavour version is possibly better. But yeah, that was number one when I was born. So I was born to a song, thankfully, that I genuinely think is outstanding. That was replaced towards the end of July by George McRae's Rock Your Baby. For me, that is literally the definition of bang average. 3 Degrees were next with When Will I See You Again. At one point, this was supposed to be King Charles's favourite band in the 70s. He used to love the 3 Degrees, apparently. This was their sole UK number one. It is pretty decent. I'm popping it into B. And that was replaced at number one with the Osmonds with Love Me For A Reason. So the Osmonds, they're coming for a lot of stick. If you've ever watched Red Dwarf, you'll have heard the line in there from Chris Barry, where what about Rimmer's rule of never tangle with anything with more teeth than the entire Osmond family. But Love Me For A Reason is a really, really good song. I'm going to pop it in the B tier. I may, on a particular day, I might even pop that up to the A tier, actually, because the A tier is looking a bit thin at the moment. To say the first half of this decade has not been going too well. And it's going to stay not going too well, because after the 3 Degrees, after the Osmonds rather, was Carl Douglas with Kung Fu Fighting. I've put this on my list in the E tier. It is not a good song. And yet, it's, I think I'm going to put it into D. It's right there as a novelty song alongside The Streak. Because actually, it's kind of fun. Even if Kung Fu Fighting is now promoted from E to D. I'm going to do a little bit of a zoom down a bit so that more of it stays on the screen. So next up, John Denver, Annie's Song. This is from the album Back Home Again. To my knowledge, I think John Denver had one hit. He is a one-hit wonder in the UK, but he was my dad's favourite artist. And I have always liked Annie's Song. If you're from Sheffield, then you may know it as and I know Matthew lives in Sheffield. You may know it as one of the theme songs for Sheffield United. You fill up my senses like a gallon of magnet. Oh, Sheffield United, come fill me again. I like it a lot. I'm putting it into the A tier. And the comments already come from Matthew saying up the blades. Told you. So, moving on from Annie's Song to Sweet Sensation, Sad Sweet Dreamer. That's actually really hard to say. It's pretty Sweet Sensation, Sad Sweet Dreamer. I challenge you to say that 10 times really fast without screwing up. I had to listen to this because I did not remember it at all. I mean, why would I? I would have been 0 years old at the time, but I didn't think much of it. It was an E tier song, totally forgettable. Followed up by Ken Booth with Everything I Own. This song has been to number one twice. Once by Ken Booth, once by Boy George. And both times, I think I put it into E. I can't remember where I put it in the 80s ranking, but I don't rate the song, let alone the versions of it. Next, David Essex for 3 weeks with Gonna Make You a Star. I kind of quite like David Essex. And I'm looking at this and thinking, I've put this in D tier, but I think that's a bit unfair. I think it's a bang average song. It's all right. I like Gonna Make It. I'm going to make it a C tier. Followed by Barry White, You're My First, My Last, My Everything. I've never really liked this song that much, but it's certainly not a turn off the radio. D tier for that. And then we get Mud, Lonely This Christmas. Tiger Feet, as you can remember, I put into B. Lonely This Christmas, the second Christmas song in a row to be the Christmas number one. Boy, is it miserable. It's an E tier song. When you go shopping and you hear Lonely This Christmas, does it make you want to buy more Christmas stuff? Or does it make you think, boy, the people here must be miserable, I think I'll go to the shop next door? Lonely This Christmas, so miserable. And that concludes 1974. So Matthew has just literally posted all the Sheffield United lyrics. I'm going to sing them for you. You fill up my senses like a gallon of magnet, like a packet of woodbine. I didn't know the line about a good pinch of snuff, like a night out in Sheffield, like a greasy chip butty, like Sheffield United, come thrill me again. I have the right, by the way, to completely edit that out on the final version. So apologies, everybody. I can genuinely sing, but perhaps not when I'm singing to a computer. We're moving on then to 1975. We are almost halfway through the decade. We're halfway through the decade. And we're almost halfway through the list, funnily enough, despite the fact there's some big bangers to come. The first number one of 1975, their sole UK number one in their career, is Status Quo with Down Down. Status Quo had so many better singles than Down Down. They really did. And in some ways, it's a shame that it's that's number one. I mean, Break the Rules, much better song. Caroline, stupendously good song. Rain from their Blue For You album. Top 10, but should have been a higher hit. But only Down Down ever made number one. That said, I think it's an A tier song. One of the best singles bands of the 70s, Status Quo. And they also put out some pretty decent albums as well. Although Hello, I would say, is probably the only truly essential Status Quo album. But Down Down, it's an A tier for me. Next up, something I had to listen to. And in my listening to, I was not impressed, and it's going into detail, is The Times with Ms. Grace. And even having listened to it fairly recently, I have no recollection of a single note of this song. I just know that when I heard it, I thought, wow, that's E tier. Next up, we have Pilot with January. Pilot actually came up on my appearance on Popmaster. And January was the only one I knew by them. However, I then since discovered that I did know Magic. Oh, ho, ho, it's magic, which is such a better song. Because January, it was D tier for me. Next up, the King of the Pause, Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel with Make Me Smile, Come Up and See Me. I absolutely love this song. I think it's a great song. We lost Steve Harley fairly recently. He died. This is his legacy, this song. I mean, I know there's other stuff out there like Mr. Soft. That was quite a good song. But Make Me Smile, Come Up and See Me is terrific. Best heard in his version. Don't bother with the version by Duran Duran, which I have heard as a B-side to the Reflex. Because the original's the definitive. Next, we have Telly Savalas. So, for those who don't know, Telly Savalas was an actor. He was playing Kojak in the 70s at the time. There's a connection to Birmingham for Telly Savalas, from my home city, in that they did an information video of the road system of Birmingham, and they had Telly Savalas narrate it. Yes, well, what's more, he played Blofeld in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So, why this actor turned to non-singing? Because my recollection of hearing If is that it's a spoken word type thing, and it's a recitation of a poem. If you can keep your head while all around are losing theirs, or maybe it's not that. Maybe that's just the Rudyard Kipling poem. But either way, it's utter crap. It's a travesty that got to number one for 2 whole weeks in March '75. To be replaced by the Bay City Rollers with Bye Bye Baby. Bay City Rollers come in for a lot of stick. Much of it deserved. One of those weird little manufactured bands. The best thing by the Bay City Rollers is Saturday Night. If you want to hear that in its most enjoyable positioning, go and watch the film So I Married an Axe Murderer, because it's used in that to great effect by Mike Myers when he's playing his father's character, and there's this shout in Scottish accent, "Turn off the Bay City Rollers." Yeah, Bye Bye Baby. It's a cover, but it's a good cover, and I'm going to pop it into the beat here. I can see why they were being a successful band, manufactured teeny pop though they may have been. Next up is the third and final number one single from Mud, which is Oh Boy, a cover of a Buddy Holly song. I can't put this in travesty, despite the fact that it's not a good cover, because it is Buddy Holly, and Buddy Holly is just was a musical god. We lost far too soon. Although, nice little link back to one of the early ones we mentioned. One of the first things to get put in the outstanding category was, of course, Vincent by Don McLean. Don McLean's most famous song is about the day the music died. So, moving on from Oh Boy, here's a thought. In 1976, there was an album that kind of disappeared without trace called Holidays, which I believe might be coming up for a reissue soon. And it is Denny Lane. It's a solo album by Denny Lane, produced by Paul McCartney. Instruments on there by Paul and Linda as well. So it's kind of a Lost Wings album, but it's a Holly cover album. I kind of wonder if they heard the terribleness that was Oh Boy and decided to do Buddy Holly well. Let's move on. Tammy Wynette is next. We're getting into some country stuff with Tammy Wynette's Stand By Your Man. I think this is A tier. I think it's a great country song. I like my country music. And I would put Tammy Wynette amongst the kind of pantheon of greats. She will return to the charts in the 90s alongside the KLF when they had Justified and Ancient. Cast your mind back to that. Next up, we have Windsor Davies and Donna Stell with Whispering Grass. So Windsor Davies and Donna Stell played the Sergeant Major and Private Lofty in It Ain't Our Hotmum, which was one of the biggest shows of the 70s at the time. And Windsor, it's a semi-comedy record. Donna Stell is singing it normally. Windsor Davies is chipping in with his character, and Windsor Davies can't sing. This was 3 weeks at number one in June '75. It's an E tier. It's not bad, because actually Donna Stell's singing is pretty decent. Next up, 10cc's second number one with I'm Not In Love. I've already placed Rubber Bullets in outstanding, but I can't place I'm Not In Love in. For me, it's a good song. It's above average, but it's nowhere near a patch of Rubber Bullets. Next, we have Johnny Nash, Tears on My Pillow. This is a pretty decent song, actually. I really like it a lot. It was then covered and taken to number one by Kylie Minogue in the 90s. So it's another crossover where we could have had either of the videos, whether it was the 70s or the 90s, featuring Tears on My Pillow. I like it. It's a B. Next up is the Bay City Rollers again with Give a Little Love. I had to listen to this to make sure. I didn't hate it. I didn't particularly like it. I wouldn't turn the radio off. Next we have Typically Tropical with Barbados. We're going to Barbados. If that rhythm of that song sounds familiar, it's because you've possibly heard We're Going to Ibiza by the Venga Boys. Again, 1990s. Another kind of 70s to 90s crossover. So Barbados, it's an E tier. You'll have to come back when we get to 500 subscribers to find out where I would have put We're Going to Ibiza. Next up, Stylistics. I Can't Give You Anything But My Love. I've got this also in E tier. I don't particularly like the Stylistics. I never have. Next is Rod Stewart with Sailing. And Sailing is Lounge Lizard territory. It's a great song, but I place it in the C tier. I think this is kind of unusual in that it was a number one hit single, but it then returned to the charts when it was used on a TV show and got back into the top 3 again just a year later. Now that's kind of very unusual. It could have even hit higher in theory. It's a bang average song for me. As is the next one, which is David Essex again with Hold Me Close. Hold me close, don't let me go. And that is also C tier. Next we have Art Garfunkel and I Only Have Eyes for You. Interestingly enough, we have obviously Bridge Over Troubled Water sitting in the outstanding category. Where am I going to put Art Garfunkel's second number one, effectively, because he's the only one who sings on Bridge Over Troubled Water. I Only Have Eyes for You is a cover. I don't think it's particularly good, but it's not kind of as bad as E tier. It's just below average for me. Then we come to a song originally released in 1969 and was a top 5 hit, and then became a number 1 hit in 1975, almost, it seems, out of nowhere. And I mean, this guy had a highly successful career up to this point, with albums that were reaching number 1, like Aladdin Sane and the Ziggy Stardust album and Hunky Dory, one of my favourite albums of the 1970s. And then all of a sudden, in 1975, when he's releasing the album Young Americans, Space Oddity finds its way to number 1. And I have no idea why. I haven't done any research, so but it's Space Oddity. It's an absolutely classic song, but it was originally 1969. Next, the most boring sleeve in everything that you've got on display here, because there wasn't a picture sleeve and I can't find one for it. It's DIVORCE by Billy Connolly. So this is a comedic version of Tammy Wynette's DIVORCE. And it's a comedy song. It's Billy Connolly, and it's absolutely brilliant. The song Divorce is great, but this version of it is something else. It's so good. And has bleeps in it because of what he says in the lyrics. This might be the first single in the UK to get to number 1 that had bleeped out material in it. There was no actual swearing, but it's what he actually says. He actually says an effing C. He doesn't say the words, but he says that line specifically, and they bleeped it. Gosh, different times, eh? However, it is not the first UK number 1 single to have the F word on it and got broadcast, because that is Hey Jude by the Beatles. If you've never heard it, I recommend you go and listen to Hey Jude. Well, listen to Hey Jude anyway, but go and listen to Hey Jude specifically at around about the 2 minutes and 50 seconds ish line just before they go into the build up to the Nana Hey Jude stuff. And you will hear John Lennon drop an F bomb. One of my favourite fun facts. And to conclude 1975 with 9 weeks at number one, the whole of December and January practically, it's Bohemian Rhapsody. And what can you say about Bohemian Rhapsody that no one else said before? I was going to try and do a fake out and put it into travesty and see what happened. But if you've watched my videos, you know I have ranked Queen songs, and Bohemian Rhapsody is outstanding, possibly the outstanding number one single of the 70s. That's not to say that I don't think that Bridge Over Troubled Water is better, because that's a top tenner of all time for me. But as the fulcrum point of the 70s, Bohemian Rhapsody is possibly the song of the decade. So 75 is done and dusted. I can't see any fresh comments, so I think we move on to 76. And kicking off 1976, ABBA's second number one, Mamma Mia. And it's our third outstanding in a row. In fact, is it our fourth? 4 outstanding in a row. Space Oddity, Divorce, Bohemian Rhapsody, and Mamma Mia. This is one of the reasons why, when I decided I wanted to do the tier list, and I've always thought that I loved the singles music of the 70s. And you kind of look at what I've put down in... I've got loads more Travises than I think I had in the 80s at this point, and loads in the E section. It's because of runs like that, where terrific song was replaced by terrific song. However, all things must pass, to quote a 1970s album title, because the next one was Slick with Forever and Ever, the second most boring sleeve that I've got to place somewhere. I had to listen to this. It was a C tier. It's bang average. And thank heaven things got better with the next single, which was The Four Seasons, December 1963, Oh What a Night. We're back in outstanding territory. I am so far enjoying the fulcrum between 1975 to 76 because I absolutely love December 1963. It's just banging tune, sung by the drummer, not by Frankie Valli, who I don't think was even involved in it. The next song on my list here is Tina Charles, I Love to Love, But My Baby Loves to Dance. I had to listen to this. Just below average. It's a D tier. Then we get to another Eurovision song. This is our third Eurovision track to be at number one in the 70s. It is Save All Your Kisses for Me by Brotherhood of Man. This is, I have to admit, this is twee. For some, possibly even unbearably twee. But I've actually got memories of this song. This is like March 76. And kind of singing this to my great aunt. Now, I was probably at least a year older than this. But I remember, I think it's a beautiful little song. You think the song's going to be about leaving his lover behind. And then there's the twist right at the end of the song about save your kisses for me. Right, you save them for me even though you're only 3. And bearing in mind I was 2 and I have placed it in the A tier because I think it's actually kind of a special Eurovision song. Save Your Kisses for Me is 6 weeks, a month and a half at number one. Replaced by previous Eurovision winners, ABBA, with Fernando. One of my least favourite ABBA singles. I've placed it in D. I find Fernando whenever I listen to it, it feels ever so slightly interminable. I don't I have to admit, I still think there is something great about the song because it's Anderson and Ulvaeus who wrote it, but it's one of my least favourite ABBA singles. Next up is JJ Barry with No Charge. And Billy Connolly did a parody of this as well, called No Chance. I had to listen to this. I freaking hated it. Straight into the travesty. And joining it is the next one. Another novelty single. This is Combine Harvester by the Wurzels. It is a travesty. I believe it held Silly Love Songs by Wings off number one. I have biases. We all have biases. I have a Macca bias. Silly Love Songs should have been a number one single. And that turd of a record stopped it. You're having a laugh, surely. Next up, The Real Thing, You to Me Are Everything, the sweetest song that I can sing, oh baby. That is a, I don't love it. It's a D tier. It's below average to me. And joining it in the same tier is Demis Roussos with the Roussos Phenomenon EP, best known track of which is Forever and Ever You'll Be the One. Not the same as the Slick song. Well, as I said, it's joining it in the D tier. Then we have Elton John and Kiki D with Don't Go Breaking My Heart. What can I say about that no one's said before? Elton John had way better songs that failed to hit the top spot prior to the release of this. And indeed, it wasn't until 1990 that he had a number one in his own sole name, because this was the only one he'd had. And Elton John is a titan of pop and rock music. But for me, it's bang average. I think I've probably just one of those songs that I think I've heard too much. But speaking of songs that I've probably heard too much and yet still don't mind ranking really highly, Dancing Queen by ABBA. It is Dancing Queen. It can go nowhere else other than outstanding. Let me know if you disagree. It has been massively overplayed, massively overheard, but it's Dancing Queen, for crying out loud. Next up is Pussycat with Mississippi. I had to listen to this. It wasn't good. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good. Replaced at number one with Chicago, If You Leave Me Now. Chicago kind of get a fair amount of stick, particularly when kind of people talking about Peter Cetera. But I like If You Leave Me Now. I think it's a pretty decent song, and I'm going to be popping it into the A category. I can't admit that I absolutely love Chicago, but I do really like If You Leave Me Now. Next up, Shawaddy Waddy. Their sole UK number one song with Under the Moon of Love. Now, I'm gonna quickly rank them. I'm gonna talk about what, if you are British, hearing the name Shawaddy Waddy brings to mind. It is a B tier song. I think it is a cover, but it's a good cover. And again, remember I said that glam rock was starting to drop out, starting to fade, and rock and roll revival was starting to come back. Shawaddy Waddy are part of that. However, if you're British, you cannot hear the name of the band Shawaddy Waddy without thinking of yet another serial sex offender and the way he used to say it on Top of the Pops. You know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention him because it might mean that my video gets banned or something. Mr. Jimmy Savile. I'll mention his name after all. And you can't help but hear the band's name, Shawaddy Waddy, done by him. Maybe it's cursed the band ever since. And to conclude 1976, we have a Christmas single When a Child is Born by Johnny Mathis. I can quite confidently state that it is my favourite Johnny Mathis song, because the only other one I know I think is Born Free. I'm not exactly a fan of Johnny Mathis, but I think When a Child is Born is really good. So that concludes 1976. Just keeping an eye out if you've had any comments. We have got 3 years to go, and we're heading into some really, really good stuff. So if there are no comments from anybody, then I'll crack on. 77. We have David Soul. David Soul was an actor who was in Starsky and Hutch. I think he played Hutch. He turned to... Thank you, Matthew. Yes, I'm not going to mention this name. And then I did anyway. Yeah. Jimmy Savile, total utter shit. I mean, that is not exactly a hot take, is it? David Soul, Don't Give Up on Us. I had to check this one out. I thought I knew it. I did know it. It's just below average. I kind of feel like I'm being a bit mean. You know what, I'm going to promote it to the C tier. C's looking a bit empty. I haven't got enough stuff that's solidly bang average. David Soul gets into the C tier after all. Next is Julie Covington with Don't Cry For Me Argentina from Evita. Written, of course, by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. And I think this song is absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit again. So hopefully you can get sight of what's going on. Yep. Evita's one of my favourite musicals of all time. I've always had this bit of a kind of a sad little ambition that I would like to play the role of Shay in Evita. I sometimes go around the house singing "Oh What a Circus," slightly in the style of David Essex, because I think Evita is an absolutely wonderful musical. I've got the double vinyl soundtrack of it from 1977. Great song. Next up is Leo Sayer with "When I Need You." This is a really, really fun pop track. I'm going to put it into A tier. I could have put it lower because it clearly steals from Famous Blue Raincoat by Leonard Cohen, which has obviously got a lot more credibility because it's Leonard Cohen. Next up, Manhattan Transfer with Chanson d'Amour. If you don't know the song, it's the song that goes rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. It's just below average. Putting it into the D tier. At least I thought I had. Where's it gone? There we go. I think it's there. Is that Chanson d'Amour? Yeah, it'll do. I'll put it in the right place, whatever. Next up is ABBA with Knowing Me, Knowing You. This is from the Arrival album, like Dancing Queen. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Dancing Queen. That's a B tier track. Still like Knowing Me, Knowing You, but it has been ruined by Alan Partridge. Knowing Me, Knowing You, aha. It kind of wrecked a great song. Not to mention his comments about Wings, but we'll move on. Replacing that in May 77 for a couple of weeks was Denise Williams with Free. I had to listen to this to make sure it was what I thought it was. It's another just below average D tier song for me. And then we get Rod Stewart. So Rod Stewart had a double A side. I don't want to talk about it, and the first cut is the deepest. One of the tracks came from A Night on the Town. The other came, I believe, from Atlantic Crossing. And it was number one for 4 weeks. However, there was a conspiracy theory that this wasn't number one for 4 weeks, and there was in fact a different song at number one, which was the Sex Pistols with God Save the Queen. Now this was Jubilee year, 25th year of the Queen's coronation, and the establishment didn't want that at number one during Jubilee week, and so they manipulated it so the conspiracy theory goes. I am not going to be ranking God Save the Queen because I've taken this list from Wikipedia, and I'm rightly or wrongly assuming that Wikipedia is gospel when it comes to this. But I don't want to talk about it, and First Cut is the deepest. I absolutely love. I've placed it in outstanding. I think it might be Rod's best single as a whole, because both songs are really good, and both versions that he does of it are really good. Certainly two of his best covers. Next up, Kenny Rogers with Lucille. You picked A Fine Time to Leave Me, Lucille. And I've already said earlier in this live stream, I like my country music, and I like Kenny Rogers. I kind of grew up listening to John Denver, Kenny Rogers, Glenn Campbell, because that's the kind of stuff my dad liked to listen to. And so I've known this song for years, and I've liked it for a long, long time. It's an A-tier one for me. Then we have the Jacksons with their sole UK number one, Show You the Way to Go. This was kind of not exactly a comeback single, but they hadn't really been in the charts very much. Mainly because Michael was given a rest to allow his voice to actually grow up. They came back, they had a few hits, and then they had this, Show You the Way to Go. I had to listen to it because I couldn't remember it, and I didn't think much of it, just below average. On to my final page of notes, which is great. Each page has taken approximately half an hour to go through. July 77, Hot Chocolate, So You Win Again. Hot Chocolate had better songs than this. They also had worse, but this was their sole UK number one. So You Win Again, absolutely average. Replaced at number one with I Feel Love by Donna Summer. Now I've got this on my notes here as a D tier song, and I think I am underselling it. This was a disco track by Giorgio Moroder as her producer. I'm going to promote it to the C tier because it's I've got to admit it's kind of an iconic track, even though I'm not that fond of it. I'm going to put it into average. Next up, second UK number one for Brotherhood of Man with Angelo. I used to like Brotherhood of Man a lot as a kid. You already know I like Bucks Fizz. I must have a penchant for UK Eurovision quartets because I am putting Angelo into the A territory alongside Save Your Kisses for me. Next up, the Floaters with Float On. You know, the one that talks about Aquarius. I like a woman or a girl who's this, that, and the other. If you've watched my travesty, my worst number ones of the 1970s, you have no question in your mind where this is going, because this was my worst UK number one single. Float On, I thoroughly despise. Absolutely despise the track. Thankfully, it was only there for 1 week, but what a piece of, well, floater is a good term for it. Next up, Elvis Presley. So Presley died, and his current single, which was probably only really showing signs of being a minor chart hit, shot to number one for 5 weeks. It's Way Down. I actually think it's one of Presley's weakest songs. I think I've ranked the Wonder Review better. Yeah, I have. Wonder Review is better definitely better than when Way Down. Next up, second number one for David Soul with Silver Lady. I had to listen to this to make sure, but I think it's like his other one, right there in the C tier. Looked like they almost used exactly the same photo for the single sleeves. Gosh, they were cheap. Certainly it was the same photo shoot. Next up, Baccarat. Yes, Sir, I Can Boogie. I think they were a Dutch duo. But Yes, I Can Boogie. It's not a travesty, okay? It's not a travesty, but it is pretty awful. It's an E. Then we've got ABBA with The Name of the Game. 4 weeks at number one. The Name of the Game it vies with Waterloo and The Winner Takes It All as my favourite ABBA songs that were released as singles. In the UK anyway. The Name of the Game is such a great, complicated chord sequence and melody, and yet sounds so good. It's outstanding. And to conclude, 1977 and a big old chunk of 78 to boot. He finally made it to number one. It's Wings. It's Paul McCartney with the double A side of Mull of Kintyre and Girls' School. As you'll have heard me say on previous videos, you probably know this anyway. This became the best-selling single of all time, with 2.6 million copies sold, surpassing by 1 million She Loves You, and it remains to this day the biggest-selling non-charity single in the UK. Yes, Bohemian Rhapsody has sold more copies, but half of those were charity release from 1991. I love Mull of Kintyre, if I'm honest. I know I shouldn't, because it's got bagpipes on it, and it's an acoustic song that's actually devastatingly simple in its chord sequence. But I also love Girls' School, the double A side to it, which I think is one of the great lost songs. I mean, how can you, a song that sold 2.6 million copies, how can you consider it a lost song? But I am going to drop Mull of Kintyre, Girls' School in the outstanding category. Next up is 1978, so I'll just check any comments. The last one is still referring to Savile. So let's crack on with 1978 as we come into the home straight. Althea and Donna with Uptown Top ranking. Average. Followed by Figaro by Brotherhood of Man. I've also placed that in average. I massively prefer Angelo and Save Your Kisses for me. But I did have a single of Figaro. I've got a feeling it was one of the earliest singles I ever owned. I mean, we're talking 1978 here, so under 4. But I've got a feeling it was bought for me. It certainly wasn't my first single I ever owned. I sometimes say that the first single I kind of had bought for me was probably Mull of Kintyre, but I think that was my sister's, really. I stole it and kept it. Next up, we have ABBA with Take a Chance on Me. I have placed this in outstanding. I love Take a Chance on Me. But I stand by my comment about Winner Takes It All and Waterloo and The Name of the Game being better. That's just 4 of their 9 UK number one singles that are truly phenomenal records. They didn't have another number one after Take a Chance on Me until Winner Takes It All in 1980. Because they went all disco on the Voulez-Vous album, which is my least favourite ABBA album. Next up, Kate Bush with Wuthering Heights. For, nearly over 40 years, nearly 45 years, this was her sole UK number one, and it was her debut single. That was at least until Stranger Things came along and caused a resurgence in Running Up That Hill, which obviously got to number one a couple of years ago. Wuthering Heights, it's an outstanding song. Moving on next to Brian and Michael with Matchstalk Men and Matchstalk Cats and Dogs. I don't hate this in the same way that other people do. I certainly don't think it is. I don't think it's above average, but it's all right. I've got it in E tier on my list, and I think I'm doing it a bit of a disservice in my memory. It's about Lowry. I'm going to pop it into the D tier. I'm going to promote it from E to D. Next up, the Bee Gees' Night Fever. One of those highly admired songs, except not by me. I think Night Fever is average category. One of those songs I think that's been overplayed. And Barry Gibb himself said he would like to place that single in a white jacket and set fire to it, because it became a bit of a millstone around his and the Bee Gees' necks. So after Night Fever, this was replaced by the best-selling song of 1978, which was Boney M, Rivers of Babylon, based on a psalm from the Bible, Psalm 137, I think, and Brown Girl in the Ring. I like the Rivers of Babylon as an average song, but I really have never liked Brown Girl in the Ring. It is a nursery rhyme. I have actually dropped that into D tier. Next up, You're the One That I Want by John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. This was at number 1 for 9 weeks, a huge length of time, just like Mull of Kintyre. I am among those who don't love this song. I'm going to drop it into D tier. Then we've got the Commodores with Three Times a Lady. I think that's their sole UK number 1. Written, of course, by Lionel Richie. I think this is a soul classic. I'm placing it in A. And then we have 10cc's third and final UK number 1 with Dreadlock Holiday. So a reggae song with slightly cancelable lyrics now. I don't like cricket, I love it. I don't like reggae, I love it. And this was 10cc when they were effectively 5cc. Godley and Cream had left at this point. And this, I think, was the last serious chart action for 10cc. They never had another number 1 single. I don't think they ever had another top 20 single after this. I could be wrong. Someone will correct me in comments after this has been published, I'm sure. But yeah, Dreadlock Holiday, I'm putting it into average because it's all right, and yeah. Replacing them at number 1 was John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John again with Summer Nights. Now, Summer Nights, unlike You're the One That I Want, I think it's terrific. I remember this being in the charts. I remember the video, and of course, the video is effectively the scene from the film Grease, where it's all done on the bleachers. Summer Nights is a great song. 7 weeks at number 1 in September, at which point it was no longer summer. That was then replaced at number 1 by Rat Trap by the Boomtown Rats, the Northern Irish kind of punk, new wave-ish band, famous, of course, with Bob Geldof. Rat Trap, I am putting that into the C tier. Next up is Rod Stewart with Do You Think I'm Sexy? No Rod in that leopard print lycra type trousers. We do not think you're sexy. It's an E. I can't put it into travesty. It's not that bad. We get to the end of 1978 with another Christmas song, Mary's Boy Child, Oh My Lord, by Boney M. It's one of my all-time favourite Christmas songs. I love it whenever I hear it, whether it be their version or even the one by Harry Belafonte. I'm popping that into outstanding. And that concludes 1978. So we have a couple of comments. Oh, as it goes, 1978 seems best year of the decade yet. Let's have a quick look through. What did I put in 78? Several outstandings, a few A's, yeah, mostly C's, only one or two D's or E's, and not a single travesty single in 1978. But then 1978 was dominated in terms of the number of weeks by two songs from Greece, the continuing success of Mull of Kintyre, and 5 weeks with Brown Girl in the Ring, Rivers of Babylon. There were probably only about 12 number one singles on that year. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. There's only 14 number one singles reached the top. We're at the top. It is time to rank 1979's list. Matthew, you might be about to eat your words about 1978. First off, YMCA by the Village People. So if you watched my worst number one singles of 1970s, you will have seen that at number 2, I placed YMCA. I have always loathed YMCA until recently. This is why I think I might have to redo my worst singles of the 70s. Because ultimately, and I think this might be a kind of sort of Stockholm syndrome, I've grown to tolerate YMCA. I banned it at my wedding. And I am aware that the moment we had done our going away kind of bye, we're off to go and spend our married life together. The DJ put YMCA on because at that point I was allowed to. The ban was lifted because I was no longer there. So I'm putting it in E tier, and I can't quite believe that I have put it in E tier. A song I've detested so long, but I have to admit it's a floor filler, isn't it? So, the biggest shock when I was preparing this, and it does say travesty on my list, I can't put it in travesty in the end. It's E. It's definitely Stockholm Syndrome. Next up, Ian Jury and the Blockheads, Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick. 1 week at number 1 in January 79. I've put that in A tier. It's a good new wave, I suppose. Were during the Blockheads punk. I know the Clash had a go at them on all the young punks, New Boots and Contracts, taking the mick out of New Boots and Panties. Yeah, it's an A tier. Next we have Blondie's Heart of Glass, their first UK number 1, and it's a phenomenal song. It took them several years to get to the point of recording it. It was known as the disco song in previous versions. If you've kind of got the CDs like I have. Heart of Glass, banging song. And it was replaced at number 1 by another disco track. We wouldn't call Blondie a disco band, but this band did become one, which is the Bee Gees. And it's Tragedy. The original version, not the version by Steps. Tragedy is one of my favourite disco songs. It's another outstanding. 1979 is shaping up pretty good. The next track is also disco, and it is I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. Much like YMCA, this would have been a travesty song. In fact, it's in my top 15 worst songs of the 70s. But something's changed recently. It is so ripped off and used in so many other songs that I've started to get appreciation for the original that this song is. I think it is basically just a recycling circle of fifths. But I've ended up putting it like YMCA in the E tier when I can't really say that either of those two are now amongst my worst #1 singles of the 1970s. They're both E tier. So moving on from Gloria Gaynor, we've got Art Garfunkel's Bright Eyes. Now this was from Watership Down, which until recently was the most disturbing U film you will ever watch. And the reason it is no longer the most disturbing U film you ever watch is because they have made it a PG. In fact, it might even have been given a 12. The rabbit death scenes are absolutely heartbreaking. And Bright Eyes, written by Mike Batt of the Wombles fame. It's an average song for me. I popped it in C. I've got a lot of memories of Bright Eyes and that video with the black rabbit, and I remember it being really, really depressingly disturbing to a, at the time, 5-year-old. Next up, we're back with Blondie with Sunday Girl, also from the Parallel Lines album, Like Heart of Glass. We're into outstanding territory again. I love Blondie. And the Parallel Lines album has got some absolutely banging songs on it. Got stuff like One Way or Another, which didn't even get released as a single. What a cracking song that is. Next we have Anita Ward with Ring My Bell. Well, it's average. Sticking it in the C tier. Ended up in the wrong place. Next up, I'm going to have to scroll slightly, is Tubeway Army with Our Friends Electric. I would not describe myself as a Gary Newman fan. But I do really rather like Our Friends Electric. I don't think it's quite into outstanding territory, so I'm going to drop it into A. It was replaced at #1 by the Boomtown Rats with I Don't Like Mondays. So you probably know that this was based on the true story of a school shooting. It is, to my knowledge, only vocals and piano. And yet, one of the fullest sounding singles I think you'll ever hear from the 1970s. I Don't Like Mondays is a truly special song. I'm popping it into outstanding. Next, Cliff Richard's Soul UK #1 of the 70s. We Don't Talk Anymore. Let's just say he didn't have a great 70s, having been king in the 50s and the 60s. And his first #1 since Congratulations in 1968. We Don't Talk Anymore. That's an A tier song for me. I think it's one of his better songs. I quite like Cliff Richards, if I'm honest. Then we got Gary Newman. So he got to #1 a couple of months earlier with Tubeway Army. Then he went solo. And his solo debut release was Cars. And Cars is an outstanding song. Another one. 1979, Matthew, I think you'll find, is shaping up to be the best year of the decade so far. So yeah, Cars, outstanding. Then we got The Police, their first UK #1 with Message in a Bottle. That's A tier, really good stuff. Replaced at #1 by Video Killed the Radio Star by Buggles. And I've got stuff against Trevor Horn. He basically gave the world Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax. He was a producer on Flowers in the Dirt by Paul McCartney, and in my opinion produced the worst stuff that's on Flowers in the Dirt, or the most out of place stuff on Flowers in the Dirt. But when it comes to Video Kill the Radio Star, it is A tier. Great song. Now we've got, 1979 is currently, because of YMCA and I Will Survive, finding their way into E tier instead of Travesty Free. All good things must come to an end. And it's Lena Martell, One Day at a Time, which is a Christian hymn. And I am a Christian, so I should, in theory, be predisposed to like this, but it's garbage. Awful. I mean, Way to wreck a good year. What a way to wreck a great year of number one singles with pap like that. Oh, um, it doesn't get much better, but it does get better with the anti-penultimate single to reach number one in the 1970s, which is Doctor Hook with When You're in Love with a Beautiful Woman. It's hard. I don't think it's meant to be a pun. But if she's that beautiful, maybe you are. I will put that in the D tier, just below average. Leaving us with The Police, Walking on the Moon, and I'm not a huge fan of the Police singles from 1979, but I do think that they're a cut above a lot of what we heard up to that point. I'm not a massive Police fan, but I'm putting it into A tier because it's still a great song. And concluding with Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 from The Wall by Pink Floyd. You already know, if you have watched the previous tier list live stream, where this is going, because I had to refer to this as being the first song that was at number one in the 1980s. And I think I already told everybody it was outstanding, because it is. So that's it. That is all 170, I think it might be, UK number ones of the 1970s, tier listed by some fool on the internet. As you can see, we haven't got a vast amount of travesties. We've got quite a few things in the D&E category and some stuff in C, but a nice full looking outstanding. So let's have a quick run through to conclude. A couple of comments first. I think 1979, by the way, did come out as the best year of the decade. I am an 80s music fan, and so it's not surprising that 1979 leading into 80 and 81 to a certain extent is going to be right up my alley. So let's zoom in a bit. That might be too far. There we go. So, in outstanding, we have got Bridge Over Troubled Water, Maggie May, Reason to Believe, 'Cause I Love You by Slade, Nilsson's Without You, Vincent by Don McLean, You Wear It Well by Rod Stewart, Blockbuster by Sweet, Come On Feel the Noise by Slade, Rubber Bullets 10cc, Merry Christmas Everybody Slade, Waterloo by ABBA, She, Charles Aznavour, Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel, Come Up and See Me Sometime, Space Oddity, David Bowie, Divorce by Billy Connolly, probably the most incongruous thing that's in the outstanding tier, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, Mamma Mia by ABBA, December 63, Oh What a Night, The Four Seasons, I can't quite make it, Dancing Queen ABBA, Don't Cry For Me Argentina, Julie Covington, I Don't Want to Talk About It, First Cut Is the Deepest, Rod Stewart, then we've got The Name of the Game, ABBA, Mull of Kintyre, Wings, Take a Chance on Me, ABBA, Wuthering Heights, Kate Bush, Summer Nights, Elton John, Elton John, John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John, Mary's Boy Child, Oh My Lord, Boney M, Heart of Glass, Blondie, Tragedy, Bee Gees, Sunday Girl, Blondie, I Don't Like Mondays, the Boomtown Rats, Cars, Gary Newman, and Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, Pink Floyd. So I think that those, what we got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those 33 songs are probably why I always think of the 1970s as being a great decade for singles, because they are really good stuff. And some comments here. I think Matthew says, I think I had the same experience of Watership Down. Absolutely terrifying. Isn't it though? Absolutely horrific film. Police, Walking on the Moon, number one when I was born. Thanks for making me feel a bit older, because I do remember that being on Top of the Pops when I was 5. And who knew I was such a Rod Stewart fan? That's an interesting point. I do like a bit of Rod, but I understand why people think he's a bit over, a bit much. Um, his early stuff's great. Always been a great singles fan, but I wouldn't, and I don't own a single Rod Stewart studio album. I did used to own every Picture Tells a Story, but I don't anymore. Um, but yeah, those 33 tracks make up a pretty solid uh, double vinyl album, I would say, of great number one singles. Um, we've been here 2 hours. If you've been with me the whole time, congratulations on your endurance. And it's been fun. I've enjoyed doing it. Thank you for everyone who has subscribed. Um, if you want to see me do the 90s, you are now going to have to start sharing my videos with people who might like them, assuming you have any friends left after having shared any previous videos, because I'm going to get to 500 before I do another live stream. And I've enjoyed them so much that it's a shame that I'm going to have to wait a long time, I suspect. Well, it's taken 13 months to go from the last live stream to getting to 250. So if it takes another year, that'll probably be good to get to 500. So thank you all for sticking with me. This has been a blast, and I will stop streaming now. Although I am still streaming, I've just stopped recording. So thanks again. Everybody, I am going to stop streaming. If you want to find out for yourself and get on and tier list the same songs yourself, when this is actually published as a video, I will put a link in the comments or in the description, so people can find where these tier lists exist. It took me ages to make them, so please do have a go. I'm going to stop streaming now. Thanks very much. Bye bye.